So I'm here in New Hampshire. We made it through Maine, and we're a couple days into New Hampshire now. Going to be going up Mount Madison later today, and I was thinking it might be a good idea to just do a video about Maine, the first state going southbound, and just some of my thoughts about Maine, and it might be helpful. Um, Maine is it's a great state. It's really beautiful. The some of the vistas, the views that you get are great. It's it, it's a lot more remote. Even coming into New Hampshire in the White Mountain National Forest, I can hear people riding Harley Davidsons frequently. And this could be because of where I am. I haven't hit the elevations yet, the 5,000 foot elevations, but it certainly is a lot more. You're much more aware of human civilization, even in New Hampshire. I'm maybe 30 miles from the Mahoosucs now. So that's one of the great things about Maine. It's very, you really feel like you're in a wilderness. The 100-mile wilderness, people can bring you food. It's really not that difficult. I think the most difficult thing about the 100-mile wilderness and what knocks some people out is people attempt to bring a large amount of food in there, which weighs them down, which makes it more difficult. And hitting that kind of a stretch where you have to carry a lot of weight and you're not in condition yet, is very difficult. Logistically, what I did was I brought basically 12 days worth of food when I went to Baxter for the day that I summited Katahdin, the day it took me to get out of Baxter to Abol Bridge, and then 10 additional days to get me through the 100-mile wilderness. The problem I had was that when I got to Abol Bridge, I was expecting there to be a restaurant there where I could get dinner and breakfast. There is a store there and a little campground, but when I got there, the restaurant hadn't opened yet. So I ended up, it was basically snack food. There wasn't really a lot of. I could have probably bought something there, but what ended up happening is I had a dinner and a breakfast. So by the time I was getting out, I was short food. Luckily, another hiker, somebody who was doing the 100-mile wilderness, Chili Mac, who's a really great guy, and if you ever see this, you're a really good guy. And I was very lucky to be hiking with some people who were very friendly and nice, who helped me out and gave me a little food. I didn't even ask for it. He was bringing. This is what some people do when they approach the 100-mile. They'll bring like 25, 30 pounds worth of food, huge food bags, which just weigh you down. But if you do that, you'll definitely find people who are more than willing to take some of your food. So luckily, he was nice enough to help me out with that. In the 100-mile, I also, I was totally out of condition to do this, and it's remarkable that I've actually made it as far as I have. Because when I got to Abol Bridge, I had blisters on my feet, and I did basically a Nero at Herd Stream, where I just rested up and treated the blister, and I made it through to a week of hiking with a blister on one of my feet and boots that weren't adequately broken in. But the last day I was planning on hiking out to Monson, and I could not put my boots on. It was just excruciating pain to have my boots on. So luckily I had Tevas. That's another thing. I think it's very important that people bring camp shoes that in theory they could use to hike for 20 or 30 miles. I think flip-flops are a real mistake. It may never happen, but it's just, whenever you're approaching going out into the wilderness, you ideally want to have redundancy. You want to have two methods of anything, two ways of making a fire, two methods of improvising shelter, whether it be a tent and a ground cloth. Because in theory, if your tent fails, you could rig up your ground cloth, a sleeping bag, and a liner, just in case something happens to one or the other. You can use one. Anyway, I think having camp shoes that you can actually wear out, or wear for 20 or 30 miles, is very important. If I had flip flops, I would have had a really bad time. So I wore my Tevas out to the road from Monson because my boots hadn't been adequately broken in. And I think honestly, it wasn't. It's the boots I have are rather narrow. I have Vask St. Elias boots. I've blamed the boots at various times because I was in excruciating agony, but the reality was that my feet weren't toughened up. So I ended up wearing the Tevas for about 140 miles, I think from Monson to Rangeley, and that process helped to toughen my feet up a lot. But I'm very, very glad I had Tevas. So the 100 Mile Wilderness, I think it's a good idea if you can to hike with people. Try and find some people who are friendly, even if you just shelter with them. That's what I did. I was in with a group of 4 or 5 people, and just stayed at the same shelters. I didn't really hike with them during the day, but I wouldn't trade anything for the 100 Mile Wilderness. That was a really great experience. I really liked hiking out there when I wasn't in excruciating agony for my feet. So from the 100 Mile Wilderness, Monson, I stayed at Shaw's, which I thought was adequate. It was nice. The people there are very nice. It's clean. It's a very good location. Lakeshore House is also very nice from what I've heard about the accommodations. The restaurant was okay. I thought it was overpriced. I mean, it was good food. They have a bar there. I did think it was a little expensive, but I appreciate the fact that Monson does not have much of an economy, and that's a primary way that money comes into that town or that village. In addition, in Monson is the barbecue, which I thought was really great. The resupply there in Monson is really Greenville. You can get some resupply at there's a bakery, which is very nice, bakery breakfast place, Pete's Place, which is great. Very good food there, and pretty reasonably priced. And you can get some resupply there, but your best bet for resupply is to get a ride up to Greenville and go to the Trading Post Market, which is a supermarket. So yeah, so after Monson, it's really easy. It's a very easy stretch. I'd say all the way through to Bigelow, into the Bigelows. Moxie Bald is really not a difficult climb. There was one northbound hiker who I think had done a 41 mile stretch through that area from the Bigelows to Monson or to Moxie Bald, 40 miles in a day. It's very flat through there. There's Moxie Bald. That's really the only major climb until you hit the Bigelows. In Caratunk, the Sterling Inn, the fellow who works there, who owns it, I guess, is very nice. He has a pretty good resupply. If you can't, he'll give you a free shuttle too. So if you get into Caratunk early before the ferry, it depends on what time of year you're going there, because for part of the year they have a ferry in the morning and the afternoon. But if you're there early, like in June, like I was, you can call Sterling Inn. He'll pick you up and go get a couple things to eat. And he'll give you a ride back to down to where the ferry is. Very nice fellow. He also has an interesting polydactylus cat, who is more than friendly. The ferryman's great. I don't recollect his name, but he's an interesting fellow. If you ask him about the river, he'll tell you everything you want to know about hydropower in Maine and how it's used as a backup to the New England power pool, which is really interesting. He's a very articulate guy. He's a Maine guide as well, so he knows. You could ask him if he's willing to talk to you, he'll tell you pretty much anything you want to know about the woods in Maine. After Caratunk, the first shelter, the first lean-to you hit is Pierce Pond, where there's a private hunting lodge. The fellow is Mr. Harrison, very nice guy. He has a lovely little dog. I think it was a poodle, a miniature poodle. A beautiful hunting lodge, 80 years old. It's got there's hummingbirds all around. It's overlooking the stream, the outflow from Pierce Pond. And when you're getting up into that area, you're getting like lots of. I've loons. There are a lot of loons from, I'd say, the 100 Mile down through maybe the Rangeley area. And if you happen to be by a pond where there are loons, they're going to keep you up all night, yabbering back and forth. They don't have a lot of calls, but they sure are loud, and they sure like to repeat those calls. But Harrison's is great. If you get there the day before, you can ask him to. He'll make you breakfast, and it's like $12 or something. And it's really he's nice. He's it's nice to talk to somebody. He'll give you water, even if you don't buy anything. He's pretty generous with water and things like that. And there's a privy there. After Pierce Pond, the Bigelow Avery is kind of a bear. It's the first. It's you go from going through flats to hitting a peak that a mountain that it's just frustrating because you're going up when you're going southbound. You go up Bigelow Avery and it's basically one ledge after another. There's like six false peaks going up it. And when I was going up there, I was recovering from a little bit of the mud butt and wasn't feeling too good. I was very weak, and I kept getting to the top of the peaks and cursing. But after that, you hit Stratton. Stratton's a great little town. The gas stations, the gas stations. There's a gas station that has some food. There's also a grocery store. There's the Stratton Motel, which is owned by a lovely lady, and there's the Wolf Den, the White Wolf Inn. I didn't. I had a beer there. I don't think I ate there. The across the street is the Stratton Plaza, which has a very nice bar and really good food. That's where I ate. I think I ate there once or no, I ate at the bar a couple times there. The people I was hanging out with some people and we had a barbecue, got steaks and stuff like that. There's also a store across from the Stratton Plaza. If you ask the owner nicely, he'll let you tent in back of his place, which is great because you can sort of sneak in and use showers and things at the other hotels. But not that anyone I know did that. But anyway, after Stratton, you reach an interesting stretch between Stratton and Rangeley. You go up Crocker, I think Crocker Mountain, which is relatively easy. Coming down off of Crocker, there's kind of a descent that's kind of difficult. You go over a rock slide. I stayed at Crocker Cole, which was a nice little campsite. But then, and then you hit. There's the original end of the Appalachian Trail is close to Spalding Mountain, between Crocker and Spalding Mountain, on the sort of south of Sugarloaf. I'm sorry, I'm getting bit. But there's an interesting thing between Stratton and Rangeley. There's a U.S. Naval training facility up in there, and I'm not going to go into detail about what they do up there, but it's an interesting thing that there's a naval base up in the mountains. I was hiking with a couple people, and we both looked at each other. We passed a couple hikers, and we looked at each other and said, "Those aren't hikers." But anyway, it's an interesting place up there. Kind of spooky if you're into like the X-Files or conspiracy theories or the government's doing weird things to people. You could make a case for that because apparently there were a lot of there was an outbreak of norovirus that fortunately nobody I was hiking with got, but the norovirus was contracted allegedly at some of the lean-tos that were directly adjacent to this U.S. Naval training facility. I'm not saying anything. You can't quote me on anything, but this is what I experienced. So Rangeley's great. It's kind of difficult to get into town there because there's no cell phone reception. You can't really call anyone for a ride. You can walk up to the hiker hut, which is a lovely it's like a little ashram there. It's got the Tibetan prayer flags and lots of Om signs. Very nice guy. He runs a shuttle twice a day down into Rangeley. I think it's like $5 a head. And he's got some nice little platforms you can tent on and a kitchen. Lovely spot. It's right by a river. You can use the river to bathe. But if you want to have a shower and electricity and a full kitchen inside, I'm getting bit. There's a new hostel in Rangeley called, I believe it's called the Farmhouse Inn. It's owned by a very, very nice family. They were very nice to us. It was like $30. It's not in the AWOL yet. and it's like a quarter mile from the IGA. The IGA in Rangeley is really pretty much the best resupply you have in Maine, in my opinion. Um, that or the Trading Post in Greenville. Those are the two best supermarkets that you're going to hit. And Rangeley has some good restaurants, a very good coffee bar that has Wi-Fi, and it's a neat little downtown ice cream place, stuff like that. So I would definitely try to hit Rangeley. After Rangeley, you hit pretty much an easy stretch into Andover. It's not until you really get to Andover that it gets difficult. The descent down Old Blue is is kind of tricky. It's not as bad as going down, say, Wildcat, but it is kind of tricky. I went into Andover from the first road and stayed at Pine Ellis. Andover, it doesn't have a really good resupply. There is a general store. You can get some supplies there, but it's not like an IGA. There's food there. The general store has decent food, and you can, if you stay at a place like Pine Ellis, if you give them a little cash, they might even drive you to the nearest Walmart, which I think it's like a half an hour away, so it might be a little pricey, but you can get out to some real grocery stores if you talk to some of the owners. The cabins, oddly enough, I met a woman whose sister runs the cabins at Pinkham Notch at the visitor center. I was talking to her a little bit. That seems like a lovely place. I didn't get a chance to go there, but I know other people who did. Somebody I was with does not have a very high opinion of Pine Ellis, but that was his experience. He thought it was really creepy, but I thought it was fine. It was nice. Andover it's a really small town. So, if you're going northbound, the end of the difficult section of Maine, what I think the difficult section of Maine is Old Blue. Going southbound, Old Blue, and then the descent off of Moody are kind of tricky. And then when you get past the second road in Andover, you're getting into the Mahoosucs. Nothing really difficult there. I think the difficult stretch southbound really starts at maybe Bald Pate before Grafton Notch, and really ends around the border after Carlo Cole. It's not. It's weird because, like going down Wildcat is probably more difficult than anything you do in the Mahoosucs. The descent off of Wildcat. Well, I from my own personal experience, when I descended off of Wildcat, of course, is right on Pinkham Notch in New Hampshire. But when I descended down Wildcat, I started at night and thought I would have enough time to go down it. And what ended up happening is I got halfway down, and it was pitch black. And I decided just to sleep in the middle of the trail. So I did that. I got up at 6:30 the next morning, and it took me an hour and a half to get down to the road. That was in daylight. So, I'm 41 years old. I do not. I'm OCD about my knees. I will frequently go very, very slowly on descents, and will go backwards because the last thing I need is a knee injury. Not just to complete the Appalachian Trail. I just don't want to be living the rest of my life with some chronic knee condition. So, Wildcat's difficult. The Mahoosucs, I didn't think were that bad. They're not easy. I didn't do it in the rain. I did it in good weather. And I took my time. I didn't really try to push myself. Mahoosuc Notch, when I was in there was a woman who fell. She was a 75-year-old section hiker from North Carolina. She was soloing from Gorham up to Monson. And she knew what she was doing. It was a clear day. She fell down and hit her head. And anyway, I was like just entering the Mahoosuc Notch, smoking some tobacco, smoking a cigarette. And these two day hikers came up to me, and they're like, they're kind of snarky, because this is when I had my trekking broom. They're like, "That's a broom," why do you smoke those? Are they cheap? Like, I don't, like, assuming that I don't have any money, which I don't, but anyway. They're just kind of snarky. So then I said, and they tell me, "Oh, you're going to soon meet the little old lady from Pasadena." And I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "Oh, yeah, she fell and hit her head, and she's going really slow." And I'm like, "So you left this old woman in the Mahoosuc Notch with a head injury?" And these were day hikers who easily could have carried her pack out, and helped her. So I went in and found her and helped her. I can kind of understand because I think that she didn't really want anyone to be helping her. She wanted to do this on her own. But I helped her carry her pack out. It got. I mean, I was maybe halfway through when I met up with her. It took about half an hour. So did the Mahoosuc Notch like 1.5 times or 2 times that day. But it is dangerous. I mean, it's. I don't think it's difficult. It's dangerous. There are a bunch of places in the Mahoosuc where you could get hurt. But I don't think it's as grueling as some of the other things that, like Wildcat. You know, I think Wildcat is the most difficult descent going southbound that you'll have. Pretty much. There are a couple spots in the Mahoosucs that are like that, but for a sustained descent, Wildcat's the most difficult. So after the Mahoosucs, you're in New Hampshire. I think it's pretty easy from the border into Gentian Pond, and then from Gentian Pond into Gorham, the first road into Gorham. It's relatively easy. So those are my thoughts about Maine. I think Maine is a great. I can understand why people have a lot of trouble. I did. I went 140 miles in Tevas because my feet couldn't. I couldn't stand wearing my boots. But I'm, I can't express enough how cool it is to camp out in Maine because it's really beautiful. You'll have the water is great. I didn't filter any water after the 100 mile. I mean, I didn't even filter it. At Gentian Pond, there's a beaver. When you cross over New Hampshire, there's a beaver in the pond at the Gentian Pond cabin. So I would avoid drinking that pond water entirely. I wouldn't even filter it. But you can find streams. I had to go back like half a mile to find a stream. But I didn't really filter it. I mean, I was careful not to drink any water that was stagnant. Just drink cold, clear, running water. And certainly don't rely on anything I have to say about anything because, you shouldn't listen to anything I have to say. So, like, in other words, if you get sick from drinking water without filtering it, you don't come blaming me. That's your own fault. I mean, I still have a filter, and I will filter water if I think it needs it. But so far, I've been lucky. The mud butt I had, which I got contracted somewhere south of Monson, I think was due to I had purchased some bacon bits that had been opened. I opened them, and I think they got some contamination, which is my own fault. But and that wasn't fatal. I mean, it was just. I'm glad I didn't get norovirus, but it wasn't really a fatal problem. It was just I got kind of sick for a few days. I was weak, Some things to think about. I'd always try to bring some Gatorade, in case you do get a stomach ailment. You just keep it in your bag. It can be hard to resist using it, but having one of those little things you can make into a bottle of Gatorade is going to be a huge help. Make you feel a lot better. A little Mountain Dew, Anyway, so those are my thoughts about Maine, and I've procrastinated yet further, and now have to go up Mount Madison. So we'll do another one of these at some point.